Through the release of atomic energy, our generation has brought into this world the most revolutionary force since prehistoric man's discovery of fire.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something really heavy, a deeply heartbreaking symmetry in modern science. It's the story of how a beautifully innocent cosmic truth came to loom over all of humanity as this specter of absolute destruction. We are unpacking the tragic paradox of E equals mc² and the fractured icon who brought it into the light, Albert Einstein.
You know, to really wrap our heads around this paradox, we have to transport ourselves back in time. Picture this, it's 1905. In the history of science, this is known as the Annus Mirabilis, or the miracle year. Albert Einstein is just 26 years old. He isn't working in some prestigious university lab with endless funding. He's literally sitting at a desk in a Swiss patent office in Bern. He's entirely detached from worldly conflicts, geopolitical strife, or the machinations of war. His work is born out of pure, unadulterated curiosity. He just had this profound desire to understand the mechanical secrets of the universe.
During this miracle year, Einstein exhibits sheer intellectual fearlessness. He publishes his special theory of relativity, establishing that the speed of light is constant for all observers. And by doing that, he fundamentally dismantles the classical Newtonian concepts of absolute space and time that had governed physics for centuries. He is challenging the very foundation of how we perceive reality, and he's doing it with nothing more than thought experiments and mathematics.
Now, the absolute pinnacle of that foundational shift was a remarkably elegant, simple equation, E equals mc². Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Einstein is gently explaining to the world that mass and energy, they aren't separate entities. Actually, they're merely different manifestations of the exact same physical reality. Matter is essentially just concentrated energy.
It was a purely theoretical insight that unveiled a beautiful cosmic symmetry. But hidden within its elegance was a staggering implication. Because the speed of light is squared, tiny amounts of mass hold unimaginably massive reservoirs of rest energy. To put that into perspective for a second, the energy contained in a single paperclip, if it were fully released, has the explosive yield of an atomic bomb. At the time, though, it was just an innocent mathematical truth, revealing the invisible architecture of the cosmos.
So here's the deeply troubling question. How did a man who derived this pure truth, a man who was a lifelong, outspoken pacifist, somehow become known as the father of the atomic age? Before we trace this grim descent from scientific beauty to human conflict, if you're finding this historical paradox as fascinating as I am, please make sure to subscribe to @FamousLivesBio and like this explainer for more history. Now, let's see how the chaos of the world dragged this ethereal theory right into the mud.
The turning point arrives in August 1939. The gathering storm of World War II is seriously darkening Europe. The innocent physics of 1905 have matured, and the discovery of nuclear fission suddenly makes the practical application of E equals mc² a terrifying reality. Driven by a desperate, agonizing fear that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime are on the brink of developing an atomic weapon, Einstein is actually persuaded to sign a now infamous letter to U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. He warns the president of this dreadful possibility.
But here is the tragedy. Einstein's warning, which was driven entirely by a desire to prevent tyranny, inadvertently triggers the very nightmare he feared. It prompts Roosevelt to launch a secret U.S. program. The Manhattan Project is born. The theoretical foundation that was laid in a quiet Swiss patent office has now been weaponized. The militarization of the atomic nucleus has officially begun.
1945. Just let that year hang heavily in the air for a moment. This is the year the theoretical reaches its catastrophic realization. Over the skies of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the mass energy equivalence is no longer just a beautiful equation written on a chalkboard. It's unleashed upon human beings.
Over 100,000 lives are lost in the bombings of those two cities. This stark number forces us to look at the massive contrast here. Think about the minuscule, invisible amount of mass required by E equals mc² to undergo fission compared to the overwhelmingly devastating, entirely visible human toll. A tiny pinch of matter transformed into absolute devastation.
Pandora's box was officially opened. And for Einstein, the aftermath was a period of agonizing existential guilt. This was a man who deeply believed in cosmic harmony, a man who famously stated that God does not play dice with the universe, and suddenly he's realizing that his life's most beautiful intellectual work
had inadvertently provided the theoretical blueprint for humanity's ultimate annihilation. When you trace this tragic timeline, it maps a rapid, devastating escalation. You go from the pure, enlightened thought of 1905 right to the frantic, fear-driven letter to Roosevelt in 1939. Then, the horrifying reality of the atomic bombings in 1945, straight through to the profound personal remorse he expressed in his later years, specifically in 1952 when he corresponded with his longtime Japanese friend Katsuhara. In a letter to Hara, who by the way was the editor of a Japanese magazine whose country had just been devastated by the bombs, Einstein wrote these anguished words. "I was well aware of the dreadful danger for all mankind if these experiments would succeed. I did not see any other way out. You can practically feel the crushing weight of a man forced to navigate a horrific historical paradox, choosing what he genuinely believed was the lesser of two apocalyptic evils."
Near the very end of his life, Einstein made a tragic confession. He stated that signing that 1939 letter to President Roosevelt was his one great mistake. Even though he didn't work directly on the Manhattan Project, he couldn't wash his hands of the theoretical foundation he laid nor the political spark he helped ignite.
In that exact same 1952 correspondence, he wrote with just profound moral clarity. He said, "To kill in wartime, it seems to me, is in no ways better than common murder." Einstein spent his final years desperately attempting to advocate for the radical abolition of war. He championed nonviolence, looking to figures like Mahatma Gandhi, trying whatever he could to somehow put the atomic genie back in the bottle.
This chilling realization was immortalized in the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, which was issued shortly before his death. We have learned with horror that science has provided man with the instruments for self-destruction. It places the legacy of his beautiful, elegant equation directly against the terrifying specter of universal death. The science was perfect. It was the humanity wielding it that was deeply flawed.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. Can humanity wield the profound truths of the cosmos without succumbing to the chaos of our own self-destruction? Einstein gave us the keys to understand the universe, but he left us with a severe warning about ourselves. Think about that irreconcilable gap between the purity of science and the fragility of our human ethics. Honestly, it's a question we are still trying to answer today.